Anastasio Somoza Debayle was born on December 5, 1925, into the powerful Somoza family that dominated Nicaraguan politics for decades. He was the youngest son of Anastasio Somoza Garcia, the patriarch who had built a political dynasty after taking power in the 1930s. From an early age, Somoza Debayle was groomed to continue his family's control of Nicaragua. Educated in the United States, he attended the prestigious West Point Military Academy, where he cultivated both military discipline and connections with the American establishment, ties that would prove crucial in his political career. When his father was assassinated in 1956, the family ensured the continuity of their grip on Nicaragua, with Somoza Debeyle's elder brother, Luis Somoza Debayle, assuming the presidency. Anastasio himself gradually rose within the National Guard, the most powerful institution in the country, which had been created and trained under American influence. By 1967, he positioned himself to take the presidency, consolidating military and political power under his control. His reign would stretch until 1979, defined by authoritarianism, corruption, and brutal suppression of dissent. Somoza Debeyle's rule was marked by his tight grip on the National Guard, which functioned as his personal army. He ensured loyalty through patronage, corruption, and harsh crackdowns on opposition movements. Political opponents were often silenced through intimidation, imprisonment, or outright violence. Despite being accused of corruption and nepotism, he maintained close ties with Washington, which viewed him as a reliable ally in the Cold War era. His alignment with U.S. interests helped sustain his rule, even as his people increasingly suffered from economic inequality and lack of freedoms. The 1972 Managua earthquake proved a turning point in public perception of his regime. The disaster devastated the capital, killing thousands and displacing many more. Instead of relief efforts reaching those in need, Somoza and his inner circle were accused of siphoning off massive amounts of international aid for personal enrichment. This blatant corruption fueled widespread anger and galvanized opposition against his rule. Nicaraguans began to see his dynasty not only as repressive but also as shamelessly exploitative. As opposition mounted, the Sandinista National Liberation Front (FSLN) emerged as the most determined revolutionary group, inspired by socialist and nationalist ideals. Throughout the 1970s, Somoza Debayle attempted to crush the Sandinistas with brutal force. The National Guard committed atrocities against suspected supporters, leading to increasing civilian casualties and deepening resentment. Far from weakening the movement, the repression strengthened the resolve of the Sandinistas and drew broader support for their cause. By the late 1970s, international opinion had turned sharply against him. The Carter administration in the United States, concerned with human rights abuses, began distancing itself from Somoza. The Catholic Church in Nicaragua, once hesitant, openly condemned the regime. Opposition movements coalesced across ideological lines. Business elites, students, clergy, and workers all united in their desire to see an end to the Somoza dynasty. The final years of his rule were marked by growing chaos. In 1978, the assassination of journalist Pedro Joaquim Chamorro, a vocal critic of the regime, ignited mass protests across the nation. This moment became the tipping point. The Sandinistas launched full-scale offensives, and Nicaraguans from all sectors of society joined the uprising. Despite his military power, Somoza Debayle could no longer maintain control. The violence escalated into a full civil war, with the regime increasingly isolated both domestically and internationally. In July 1979, the Sandinistas launched their decisive push, and Somoza realized his grip on Nicaragua was collapsing. Abandoned by his U.S. allies and with rebels encircling Managua, he resigned and fled the country on July 17, 1979, marking the dramatic end of 4 decades of Somoza family dominance in Nicaragua. He went into exile first in Miami, then Paraguay, seeking safety under the protection of another dictator, Alfredo Stroessner. Anastasio Somoza Debale's rule ended in blood and chaos. By the late 1970s, Nicaragua was boiling with rebellion. The Sandinista National Liberation Front FSLN, a leftist revolutionary group inspired by anti-imperialist ideals, grew stronger by the day. Somoza tried to crush them with his National Guard, but every act of repression only inflamed the resistance further. Entire villages were bombed, thousands were killed, and the brutality of his forces turned much of the world against him. Even his longtime backer, the United States, began to distance itself as human rights abuses drew global condemnation. In 1978, the assassination of Pedro Joaquim Chamorro, a prominent journalist and opposition figure, marked a turning point. His death fueled outrage and unified opposition groups across the political spectrum. The streets filled with protests, strikes paralyzed the economy, and the Sandinistas gained legitimacy as the only force capable of toppling the dictatorship. Somoza responded with even greater violence, but the tide had turned. By mid-1979, Managua was engulfed in fighting. The Sandinistas launched a full-scale offensive, and Somoza's once iron grip on the country began to crumble. On July 17, 1979, Somoza fled Nicaragua. His departure ended more than 4 decades of Somoza family rule. He escaped first to Miami, but under U.S. pressure was denied asylum. Eventually, he settled in Paraguay under the protection of General Alfredo Stroessner, another dictator. Meanwhile, in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas declared victory and began reshaping the nation. His departure was celebrated by the people, though the scars of his dictatorship remained deep. Exiled, Somoza lived in wealth and comfort, but also in constant fear. He knew enemies were everywhere. His vast fortune, amassed from looting Nicaragua, ensured a luxurious lifestyle, but he was haunted by the idea of retribution. His memoir, Nicaragua Betrayed, attempted to defend his legacy, blaming the United States for abandoning him and painting himself as a victim of communism. Few believed him. To the world, he remained a symbol of greed, brutality, and corruption. Retribution eventually came. On September 17, 1980, in Asunción, Paraguay, Somoza's car was ambushed by members of the Argentine revolutionary group ERP. They fired a rocket and bullets, killing him instantly. His death was seen by many as poetic justice. The dictator who had ruled through violence met his end through violence. The news spread quickly, and in Nicaragua, people celebrated the fall of a man whose name had long been synonymous with oppression. History remembers Anastasio Somoza Debayle as the last of a dynasty that bled Nicaragua for decades. He was a man who could have been remembered as a builder and modernizer, but whose insatiable greed and violent rule cemented his legacy as one of Latin America's most notorious dictators. His fall marked not only the end of his family's reign but also the beginning of a new, turbulent chapter in Nicaraguan history.